This is Conversations on Careers and Professional Life, a podcast from the Foster School of Business, MBA Career Management Office. I'm your host, Gregory Heller. On each episode, I talk with guests from faculty and staff to students, alumni, and business leaders about the skills and strategies that can help you design a professional career that you're happy with. My guest today is Melissa Schneider. She is an executive coach who works with leaders and emerging leaders to develop high-performing teams. She comes to this work after more than a decade at companies including Intuit, LinkedIn, and GoDaddy, after getting her MBA from the MIT Sloan School of Management. I met Melissa through my colleague Elaine Knutson and wanted to bring her on the podcast to talk specifically about her experience completing her MBA and re-entering the workforce during the global financial crisis. We're speaking at the end of November 2022 as daily headlines bring news of layoffs in the tech world, inflation remains high, and uncertainty is the watchword for the economy in the US and abroad. Melissa Schneider, welcome to Conversations on Careers and Professional Life.
Thank you for having me.
So take us back to getting into your MBA. You get all your applications in, all of that's before the economy melts down, and now you're in school and you think, what was it like to be in that situation?
Well, I think everyone goes into their MBA program with some degree of preconceived notions about what looking for a job, finding a job, getting placed with a company is going to be like once you graduate. You've made this investment of your time, you're investing, your energy, your money into a program that you worked really hard to get into. And as realistic as you might be about what it looks like to be an MBA out in the job market, there's a certain level of expectation that you have around how doors will open. So, I'm trying to remember exactly what month it was, but I definitely recall sitting in a lecture hall and listening to a lecture about the global financial crisis that was well afoot the second half of my first year of business school, and starting to hear just even a buzz in the room about a number of our classmates who had already had their offers rescinded. They were second years. They were planning to go into some of the staples of post-business school life. Finance, obviously, our folks going into finance, a lot of them had those offers taken back. Some people had been given offers for companies that were shutting down, for firms that were completely dissolving as a result of that crisis. But people in industries like consulting, and certainly in areas like marketing, which was my area of focus and interest, were finding that those organizations that had previously budgeted to bring them on were saying, hey, how are we going to slim down? How are we going to react? And look, that class of people that they had just hired in, they gave them some nice little offers and said, sorry, we're not going to be able to bring you on. And so that was frightening as someone who had a whole, many, many months ahead of them to try and find their full-time job. And so, I went through my second year of business school in a completely different environment than my predecessors had. There were not as many companies that were coming to the table in the field that I was interested in. They had either let people go from their existing workforce, or they had set different expectations around how they were going to grow via MBA hiring. I went to a very competitive business school, but we didn't always make the cut in terms of where some of these companies were going to go to hire some of their marketing talent, interestingly enough. So if they were going to prioritize the jobs that they did have and where they were showing up, it wasn't a foregone conclusion that they were going to come to my school, that they were going to be there at Sloan. So it was really shocking and scary, thinking that the preconceived notions I had gone in with about the cornucopia of jobs that would be kind of sitting there in front of me to go after wasn't going to be there after all. And I was going to have to think differently about how I found my job after business school.
So how did you change your approach to the job search as a first-year MBA student or your internship search?
Well, yeah. So my internship was not impacted, which I was grateful for. As I think back on it now, I realize that it was actually the fall of my second year where it became very apparent that the housing crisis had kind of toppled the economy in so many ways. So my internship wasn't impacted. It was mostly my full-time job search that changed. I went through my internship and had a wonderful time doing an experiential marketing internship at Dell in their consumer group. And I had received a full-time offer to come into that group. And it just wasn't it didn't check some boxes for me in terms of where I wanted to be and the exact type of work I wanted to be doing. But so I didn't end up taking that offer. But that meant I had to get really creative when it came to finding that next full-time job, again, because there wasn't this roster of marketing roles that were coming to campus to hire that fall.
So you have this opportunity to go back to Dell, but it doesn't tick all the boxes for you. There's a global financial crisis setting in, and you're saying, I'm going to hold out for something that meets more of my requirements as a job seeker. What are the activities you engaged in during the remainder of that year to find that next opportunity?
Yeah, I actually think that before I engaged in any activities, I first had to get square with myself about those boxes that I wanted to tick. Not taking that full-time offer was risky given the job environment, but I had spent some time with both the career office at Sloan, with friends at Sloan who had come to know me and what I was capable of and what I wanted and with my fiance at the time, to say, how do I prioritize things like the location I want to be in, the field I want to work in, the type of work I want to be doing, the type of company that I want to work for, the industry that I want that company to be in, making a list of those things and then saying, okay, if this is what I value and I've ranked these in importance, now what? And the now what in that environment was doing a whole bunch of networking. And not networking just within the alumni community, but networking with the people that were in my class to talk about the types of companies that they had worked for before coming to business school, the type of people that were in their networks, and starting to network in ways that I knew I could do, but hadn't had to do in my previous life pre-business school. But having that list in hand made it easier for me to say, okay, like, what are the companies? Who are the people? How do I make connections with them? And how do I start having conversations that are just about getting to know people out there at those companies as soon as possible, so that I can go and then have conversations with them at the right time to talk about my job search.
That's great that you looked at your classmates as resources as well, and not just looking to alumni. I always tell students, you're in this resource-rich community. You have all of this network through the people you've known and everyone that you have in class and who they know, and you have this time to build your network. And that sounds like that's what you were thinking. How will I activate it when I need it? It's like we talked about when we first chatted, not thinking about transactional just in the moment, but how will you build something going forward that can be helpful to you?
Yeah, that is 100% the biggest piece of advice that I could give someone who is starting to plan for an economy that is not throwing throwing jobs at business school students. An economy, frankly, that isn't throwing jobs at anyone, where there are hiring freezes, and you don't know how long those hiring freezes are going to go on for, when there are big decisions being made about how they're going to take their workforce planning and alter it to adjust for the risk of a economy on the kind of brink of recession. The biggest advice I can give is just get to know people. Just go out and start to and do the research. Approach it as research. Approach it as broadening your own network, because you're going to learn a lot about these companies. You're going to learn a lot about yourself. And in the end, if you have a company that has a hiring freeze, they're not going to have something to serve up to you right now, but having a relationship with someone there is going to give you an opportunity to be there when things do improve, when they do unlock those, some hiring in a certain group that you're interested in. So networking is not about going and asking for a job. Networking is about getting yourself out there, meeting people, having them know you, learning from them, and creating a sustainable relationship that you're going to be able to build on and leverage and give back to over time.
Do you have any advice on making that first outreach to connect with people, especially when the news is of layoffs and the layoffs aren't done, and you're reaching out to someone at a company to say, hey, I'd like to get to know you and learn about your work and this role? Is there a very different approach to making that ask in this kind of environment than in an environment where everything's firing on all cylinders and there are lots of jobs?
Yeah, I think it's important to be candid about kind of who you are. I'm in my second year of business school. I'm enjoying, growing my understanding of this field. I'd love to pick your brain on how you have developed your career and landed in the spot that you're in. If you present it as, I want to learn about you. Yes, you can ask, I also would love to learn more about your experience at X company, making it about them and their experience. I mean, that's what you really want, right? Is to get to know the person, to get their feedback about the organization, the industry, the type of role that you're looking at. And the second thing I would say is be empathetic. Someone who is, it doesn't matter if they're a very senior leader, someone who's been at the company for years and years and years, there's a bit of unpredictability right now around, whose group is going to be the one where the company needs to make some hard decisions. That person may be making some really hard decisions about people that work for them and work with them. And so, having the empathy that if you're not hearing back from someone, or if they get back to you and say, hey, this isn't a good time, you just don't know kind of what they're working through day to day. So again, come from a place of just genuinely wanting to learn, and remember to have just that empathy for what that individual may be going through at that point. And do some follow-up if you don't hear from someone, but maybe give them some time, and then follow it back, in a couple months. I can't hear you. Sorry. Oh, I didn't realize it was. Sorry. Oh,
So you've been networking, you're applying to jobs, you're getting closer to graduation. Tell me, did you have a job at graduation?
I did not. I did not have a job at graduation. I was speaking with companies that were at that point not hiring for July, August, September. They weren't hiring for graduation. I was talking with people about jobs that they were trying to hire for on demand. And I knew that and I accepted that. And I think that's another really important thing for people to remember is that when you move away from that standard hiring practice out of business school, when you move away from those roles where they've been carved out for someone who is coming out of a graduate program, you are officially in a timeline that is just like every other job. They have an opening, they want to fill it. And so I graduated and yep, that was a little bit scary to be at the end of business school without a job. But I also knew that when I did find the right thing, it was going to be because they needed someone then and there. I ended up at Intuit, and I found this role and a team and an incredible hiring manager all through one of my business school classmates who had been at Intuit prior to business school. He had introduced me to his former manager who was in a completely different group than I ended up in at the company. But we met. I learned a lot about him. I learned a lot about the company. He introduced me to someone else and so on and so forth. And so about 2 months after I had graduated and after just a number of conversations with a number of incredible people at Intuit, I landed a role in their payments group. I landed a role as a product manager. Yeah. And again, I went back to that list. I had been a product manager prior to going to business school. I wanted to transition into a role in marketing. But on my list, I had determined that I wanted to work for a company in Silicon Valley. So I wanted to work for a tech company that focused on either consumers or small businesses. I had determined that I wanted to work for a company that was customer focused and where there was a lot of great internal movement within the organization. So that no matter what type of role I ended up in, I had the opportunity to learn from others and navigate my way through. And as I talked to more and more people at Intuit, I had found that there had been so many people that had worked at the company for a long time that had worked in different groups, in different roles, and felt so supported by the organization. So when I ended up talking to people about a product management role, no, it wasn't marketing, but I saw a path for me to get in, check those other very critical boxes for myself in terms of the industry and location and the type of company. And that I'd have the ability to learn and kind of move around within. And I was comfortable and not just comfortable, excited about that opportunity.
Just being flexible. You have this expectation. You're going to business school. You're going to make a move into marketing, and you end up in product management, and you see it as a path towards perhaps getting into that marketing role later.
Yeah, absolutely. Flexibility, creativity, being open to what your priorities truly are in the context of your career, not being narrow about it being a certain type of job.
So you move around at Intuit, spend some time there, probably rack up some great accomplishments and experience, and then you decide to make another move. Tell me about that.
I did. Yeah, so I was at Intuit for close to 3 years. I spent some time in product management, and then within that same payments group that I was in, had I'd come to know the business very well, but also had come to understand the marketing organization really well and landed in a fantastic role in marketing. And made the decision after some time to take a role at LinkedIn in a different side of marketing. So I had been in product marketing at Intuit and decided to take swing over to more of a marketing communications role, and ended up working in a B2B organization at LinkedIn.
Now, that didn't go exactly as you had hoped, did it?
Yeah, no, it ended up being the most incredible learning experience, but no, it did not. I did not show up and feel like either A, I was crushing it. I didn't feel like it was the best fit for me in terms of the role. There were incredible people, and it was a wonderful company that was just really taking off on this rocket ship trajectory at that point. It had, in terms of, the things that new list that I had made at that point, experiences that I wanted to have, being part of a company that was moving super quickly and doing some of the things that I saw LinkedIn doing felt so exciting to me. But once I was in the role, I realized, this role of marketing communications doesn't feel like the right fit for me. Working in B2B didn't feel like the right fit for me. And yeah, that was also a bit of a shock to the system to say, oh, like I didn't make the best decision. And so what do I do now? And again, you go back to your list, you go back to your network, you start to think about opportunities within that company, and going back to my network and talking to people and saying, hey, you know what? I've learned something about myself being in a role and in a setting that doesn't feel right to me. It really helped me figure out what to do next and how to make sure that I made the next best choice from a career perspective. And my next role ended up coming from a former colleague at Intuit who reached out to me about a fantastic opportunity to come in and lead at GoDaddy, which was focused on consumers, small businesses. It was a product marketing role. Again, just kind of back to the things that felt right, that I had already learned worked for me. That experience of not having everything click, I got so much more out of that than being in a position where everything just felt right. So
sometimes you need that feedback, and it isn't always positive feedback, to understand where your guardrails are, that you've gone too far in one direction and that you've maybe gone outside of that set of criteria that really helps you thrive and that you really enjoy. So you mentioned talking to your network, talking to friends. Was there a personal process around the introspection or the self-reflection that you found helpful to get past the feeling like you'd made a mistake?
yeah, I mean, as I look back, I realize I was having a real growth mindset moment, but I think, we all talk a big game about, hey, learn from failure and, pick yourself up and see what you learn from it. But in that moment, I was upset. I was sad that I had made a mistake. Part of my process was kind of, recognizing why I felt so bad, like recognizing what I would call quote unquote failure. And kind of being in it for a minute and then taking a step back away from it. And again, talking to my network, talking to people I had worked with, where I had been, fulfilled, successful, happy, where things had felt right. Those were, those conversations helped me take a step back and look and say, okay, I need to kind of walk the walk when it comes to failing fast, right? I need to look at it, see it as learning, see it as, a failed experiment, if you will, and then move on. So process was a lot of it was just recognition that what was happening had felt bad initially, but in the end was exactly what I'd been talking about doing as a product manager, as a marketer, which was go out and experiment, find something that doesn't work. What do you learn from it? And then pivot away from it. So just that recognition was a huge part of the process.
So you made a pivot again. You head to GoDaddy in a product marketing role.
Yep.
And that's where you were for the next couple of years.
I was there for 9 years. Yeah, I was at GoDaddy for almost a decade. And gosh, again, looking back at that experience that I had at LinkedIn, what I learned about myself, what I learned about the types of customers I wanted to work with. And it put me in this position to go to a company that was pre-IPO, that had, aspirations of growing globally, of transitioning brand in really meaningful ways, of building customer-centric products. Like I ended up in this experience that gave me so much incredible learning and opportunity over the course of 9 years to go through so many different experiences. If I hadn't had that experience at LinkedIn, I don't know if I would have taken that jump over to go back to product marketing at a company focused on the type of customers that it was at that moment. And if I, looking back, being at GoDaddy in that moment of its evolution was so educational. It was so important to my growth as a leader. And I'm so grateful for how it all transpired.
Was your domain experience with the small and medium enterprises that you'd been working with at Intuit, did that contribute to your success at GoDaddy?
100%. Again, because I had gone and pivoted to working in a B2B setting, and just it's a different type of marketing motion. It's a different type of setup, B2B versus working with small business, working direct to small business, direct to consumer. And so having learned that that's what I loved, having really had the opportunity to understand, I didn't fully understand the degree to which the type of customer mattered to me, the degree to which the industry mattered to me in the context of my fulfillment and my enjoyment of the work. Having had that experience at Intuit and then being able to bring that over to GoDaddy, just really helped me make that connection even further. So being able to bring that domain knowledge was valuable. What was even more valuable was my own realization of why I loved working with that type of customer.
So again, that self-awareness.
The self-awareness. Yeah. Every single kind of moment in your career where you can look back and say things weren't great or things were amazing. They're all just these moments where you can step back and say, what did I learn about myself in that moment? What I value, what I care about, what makes me happy, what gets me up in the morning, gets me excited about work.
Do you have a regular practice around that kind of reflection?
I do now. As an executive coach, as a leadership coach, I'm sitting with individuals who are at various stages of their careers. I work with people who are, looking to make it to the next level of their career, and they're, 5-10 years in. I work with people who are in the C-suite. And it doesn't matter what stage of your career you're in. Part of what I do in my practice with others is looking to have them evoke and call up those moments and really examine them to see what it tells them about who they are that they can use going forward. I practice what I preach. So when I'm doing that with others, I'm now more than ever taking a step back and looking at, my life today, my experiences of the past, and when I think about those times when I'm feeling frustrated, those times when I'm feeling so overjoyed in moments that involve my work, again, taking that step back and just looking at them and saying, why? Why am I feeling this way? It's so powerful. And so it's not a practice that I have a name for, but if you're ever involved with a coach, or if you're ever coaching someone, just asking that why can be so powerful. You walk away with real lessons about who you are.
That's such a great piece of advice, and something it sounds like you came to later in your career. So hopefully listeners who are earlier in their career will pick that up and start practicing it now. So 9 years at GoDaddy, a little bit of time at LinkedIn, 3 years at Intuit before that. Now, when you look back at 2009, which I'm sure felt really scary and unnerving at the time, how do you think about that now?
Oh, gosh. I have incredible gratitude for the experiences that I've been able to have, both ones that felt great at the time, ones that felt not so great at the time, the times when things felt super hard, the times where there were just these intense moments of celebration, of accomplishment. I'm so grateful. I also have a great deal of pride around moments where I picked myself up, moments where I believed that there was something I could step up and do, where I looked to my network, where I looked to the resources that I had at my disposal and really used them. So yeah, everyone's going to have a roller coaster. If you're doing things right, you're doing a bunch of learning. Things are going to feel great some days, not great others. But I am so grateful and so proud of how I rode the waves and navigated my way through, and all that I learned from doing that.
Do you have any advice for students and job seekers in this market that we're in now in late 2022?
I would just go back to being open and creative about your approach. I think there's, again, a degree of disappointment. I'm going to business school, I am making this investment, and this thing that is completely out of my control has happened that's going to impact my search. Well, I think that's life. And you don't know when you get to that next job or the job after that, how it's going to unfold. You don't know what else is going to happen that's going to be out of your control down the road. So building that resiliency now, building that creativity now will pay off in spades throughout your career. And then do the work to know what you value. Really sit down and think about what is most important to you. What are your non-negotiables? And where do you see that there's something that could look slightly different, that doesn't have to show up in the way you absolutely expected it to, but could blossom and turn into something better down the road? I didn't want to land back in product management, but I landed back in product management at an incredible company that was investing in its employees, that did just wonderful work out with a community of customers that were inspiring to me. And ultimately, that ended up being the unlikely choice that I ended up making, given where I thought I was going to be at the beginning of business school, but ended up setting me up for this incredible career down the road where, look, I ended up as a marketing executive toward the end of my corporate career. So be creative, know who you are and what you value, and build that resiliency that's going to help you move along your path.
And focus on what you control.
Let go of what you don't control, right? The same way you look and say and recognize that something is a learning versus abject failure. Recognize that there are some things you control and there are some things that you absolutely don't, and then let them go and focus on who you are, what you value, what you can do.
Are there any books that were really instrumental in your career that helped you think about being a great product manager or how to chart your career that you would recommend?
Yeah, I'm a little biased now, having done some more work in the field of coaching. I think some of the greatest assets that you can invest in as you're growing as a leader is really understanding who you are, right? There are so many books you can read about industry and best practices and experimentation, and there's all sorts of things that are unique to the work, and those are all fantastic resources. But if I were going to say to someone on who's in the midst of thinking about that next phase of their career, I would say understand your strengths. I'm a huge proponent of doing work around understanding, the areas that you shine in. So taking something like a strengths finders, really deeply understanding those strengths. There's a book, right? You can definitely read up and understand a little bit more about how you tick. Or what makes you tick. And then I would also say, I'm looking at it right now, which is Designing Your Life, which is a book that, again, sets you up to think about the various pivots and the twists and turns that your career is going to take from a place of not just understanding yourself, but from a place of experimentation, from a place of saying, hey, let me try this on and see how it fits. So I would say some of the resources you can think about are really less about the industry or the field. Those are great. I've got a library full of them, but the things that I value most are those that have helped me dive in and really understand that in any number of situations, how am I going to show up? How am I going to pivot? How am I going to think about what matters most in the context of my work and my life?
Regular listeners of the show will know that I talk about Designing Your Life and CliftonStrengths from Gallup all the time, and I didn't put you up to either of those plugs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Designing Your Life is a fantastic set of tools and exercises that we take students through at the beginning of their MBA experience. And I think people can keep going back to it at various points during their career, especially when there are inflection points. And we give all of our students their top 5 Clifton strengths. And that's another one that I encourage people to revisit. I know I reread my Clifton Strengths report every once in a while to pick up on new nuances and think about how I can tackle challenges that I'm facing or problems that I'm having. So I think these are 2 fantastic tools for self-exploration and career planning and skills development that people should really consider using.
Yes, absolutely. No, you did not put me up to this. I genuinely, reflecting back on my experience immediately post business school and my experience over a decade after business school, I stand by that those resources, those practices, those things that help you reflect on who you are some of the most helpful and sustaining practices that you can invest in for yourself.
I think that's a great place to leave it. We got some good advice from your experience, Melissa, entering the job market after your MBA into the global financial crisis. And I think it'll be helpful to listeners who are thinking about charting their career path during this time of uncertainty that we're in now, at the end of 2022 and into the beginning of 2023. So, Melissa, thank you for having this conversation on careers and professional life.
Thank you.
Melissa shared some fantastic advice about how to handle job searching in a difficult job market. She talked about the importance of building your network, and I like the saying that you need to dig the well before you're thirsty. I picked that one up from Jordan Harbinger on his podcast. The idea that you have to build that network for the long term because you don't know when you're going to need it. She also talked about being flexible. She wanted to move away from product management, but she had to take that first role at a business school as a product manager before she could move into the direction of marketing. And then thinking about the long view. In the moment, these times can seem very scary and the challenges even insurmountable. But as we see with Melissa in her career, she was able to pivot in the directions that she wanted to go in. And looking back, the experience, the challenge that she faced during the global financial crisis helped her grow as an individual and professionally. As always, I'll put some links in the show notes and link to Melissa's website where you can find more information about her coaching practice. And you can find all of that at conversationsoncareers.com. Thank you for listening to Conversations on Careers and Professional Life. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend or classmate. Help others find the show by leaving a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Conversations on Careers and Professional Life is produced by me, Gregory Heller, with support from the Foster School of Business, Office of MBA Career Management. Learn more about the show, find show notes and past episodes, and get in touch with me at conversationsoncareers.com.